Thank you. Wow, this is incredible. I have spoken at enough events and forums that I know that the most difficult and undesirable speaking slot for most speakers is after lunch. So when I looked at the program when it came out a while back, I thought, yeah, great. But I also thought perhaps it would be a little bit of an adventure for me to try at this event what I have never, ever tried in the last 12 years that I have been speaking. So I'm using you for an experiment. Please bear with me. But I am desperate because this is a post-launch speech. But I would like you to indulge me, please, in this mind exercise. I promise you it's nothing dodgy. However, I just need you to imagine yourself invited by me, personally, one-on-one, to my village in the southeastern part of Nigeria. In your mind's eye, I just want you to imagine it. And hopefully, when I invite you, please come with me. So I grew up in a small city in the southeastern part of Nigeria called Owerri. I am from the Igbo tribe, which is the predominant group in that region. But my actual village is my ancestral home, which is about 35 miles down the road. And that's where my grandmother was living until she passed away. That's when my grandfather was living until he passed away. That's where my parents currently reside. And it's really our ancestral home. Everybody in that village, peaceful village, by the way, built within the rainforest, beautiful. Everybody there is somehow related to us. So it's only a very small village. Now, we used to spend a lot of time there. So now I want to invite you with me. Let's go to my village, Obianuju, in the rainforest. So we arrive there, and we get the message that my niece, my sister's daughter, has just given birth to a baby boy. By the way, this is true, this part. This happened exactly 2 weeks ago. My niece gave birth to a beautiful baby boy out in London. So we get a message. You and I get a text message from London because we're in my village. And it's, oh, Dozier has given birth, and she's healthy, and the baby is absolutely healthy. Thanks be to God. Then we rejoice. And then my mother quickly sends a message to one of my village aunties. Oh, by the way, I need to tell you so that you can imagine it properly. This is not one of those romanticized visions of an African village. This is a village very much like many villages in any part of the world. There are brick houses like the ones you find in Minnesota, United States. There are also thatch houses and huts and small houses. But everybody is living together. Everybody is living in dignity. Everybody is happy. Everybody understands who they are as a person. So we're all living together, yes? And then we get this message, this great message. And my mom quickly sends a message to my auntie and says, my granddaughter just gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. So it is now evening and we all go to bed. I'm sorry, this is going somewhere. We all go to bed. Now it's 6 a.m. the next day. And we start hearing footsteps, light footsteps of women outside our house. Uh-oh, I know what's coming, but you don't because you're my guests. Then we hear it. A chant from my village auntie, whose piercing voice rings out in the early hours of dawn. It goes like this. Hey, 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 aye, oh, we, onye jebe banga, oh. Then you hear another woman somewhere beside her scream, Aye, oh wait, Chineke imela o. Aye, oh wait, orongwa o. Aye, oh wait, ekele diri Chineke o. And then they just begin to give glory to God. I'm sure now you're wide awake. Apologies. I will give you a direct translation of everything I've just said now. This is not some romanticized version of the cute Africans chanting in the rainforest. Because it does have profound meaning. They have just made 4 announcements. The first one, Onye jegbe gbanga o. I'm going to apologize because this is a literal translation, but I will also quickly tell you the meaning of it. Onye jegbe gbanga o. That means if you have a gun, please bring it and shoot here. Don't do that. But that means the child that was born, remember I told you my niece gave birth to a baby boy, not just any baby, not some fluid, undetermined gender, but a very well-determined baby boy. So what this, my village auntie, has declared in our native tongue very strongly is that bring your gun because a warrior has been born. This child is 24 hours old, born all the way out in London, but they know that is a child of our bloodline. But a warrior has been born who is going to defend this family with the gun, if need be. Now, if it were a baby girl, they would never say that. They would say, Onye jego bianga o, which is something a bit lighter. It means, he who has money, bride price money, please come right now because a girl has been born. Come and book your space because we have a gorgeous bride in the future. Now, that's the first line, which is in 2 forms, depending if it's a baby boy or if it's a baby girl. Now, the second line, Ekele diri Chineke o, which is very quick to add. Yes, a child has been born who is either a warrior or a bride, future bride. But secondly, thanks be to God. Because we know this child didn't just fall down from the skies. We know this child didn't just somehow materialize. This child has been given to us by God. The next one, Orongwao, is just saying, please don't be offended. We're singing at 6 in the morning, waking a whole village up. But a child has been born, so we do have to declare that a child has been born. And finally, once again, they go back. Chineke ime, now reiterating again in different words, we are grateful to God. You see how profound this is? Now, I always heard this song and this chant from when I was little. It did not matter whether it was a poor family gave birth to a baby, or a rich family gave birth to a baby. If you hear the Orono, this is called the Orono, by the way, if you hear it at 6 in the morning, you must know one thing. A child has been born to us in this village, and we are grateful to the Almighty God. This is how deep my people were. This is how the kind of heritage we have received, and how intricate and detailed, even in the chant, the 4-lined chant of village women in a small village in the southeastern part of Nigeria. Now, I will challenge you to bring out just one of those women who may or may not even be able to speak a word of English and put them on one side. Then please go out and bring out one strong feminist from New York. Let them face one another. And let this feminist who is here, I challenge her, try to convince this African village auntie that the child that is born, perhaps the gender is not quite sure. Perhaps the pronoun is not exactly set. Perhaps, the child has to see how they feel within themselves. I challenge you. You see why it is difficult, or why it has been such a strong challenge to win over the Africans to this whole new ideology that is going crazy in the West. You see the reason? Because within a lot of the African cultures and customs, within their language, within their way of life, within their view of life, it's already woven in certain things that you cannot dissuade us of. The human person and the dignity that is accorded to us by God himself, that these women are coming to chant about a baby that is born. They could be singing like we're at a party, but no, immediately they declare that this child has been born, warrior or bride to be. The next thing they say is they're giving glory to God. So it really goes hand in hand, this deep understanding of the human person, that even if you are poor, even if you are rich, God has given you to us. And yes, you are here. You are a blessing already to your community. This is where most of the African communities stand. And yes, it's true. There are big cities across the continent of Africa, believe it or not. There are many people who are engaging in all kinds of new thoughts and ideas and ideologies. They're online. There are also people who are kind of buying into a lot of the things coming out from the Western civilization. But at the core, whenever I meet an African, anywhere I go, and the person is trying to challenge me and say, oh, maybe abortion, maybe not, I tell you, let's stop here. Let's not have this discussion here on the campus of Harvard Law. Let's go to the village. Okay, let's go home and let's speak in our native tongue. Because the problem that you're going to encounter is that our language is already set. Our language is already meaningful and it's set in its ways. You cannot begin to unfold it and try to tease it out. It's already set. So when I was growing up, I think my father, who right now I now realize he's a wise man. Back then, I didn't think so. During the holidays, instead of him taking us back to instead of him taking us to, somewhere nice, the equivalent, I suppose, of your Disney Orlando, he would take us straight back to the village, to my grandmother, and he would make sure that we are learning the language, we are learning that worldview, we are learning the cultures and customs of our people. Because my father, who saw right into what could happen in the future, knew that whereas I could grow up and go abroad, for example, to the University of East London, and study amazing subjects like biomedical sciences, and be here at a wonderful forum like this and speak to the wonderful American people, but nothing could ever replace the lessons I learned as a little girl standing at the feet of my grandmother, who could not speak English. Those lessons are the things that have given me the core around which I have then been able to then fill up with everything I'm learning here at this amazing conference, for example, at the universities where I have been, at the places where I have worked in the different, at different stages of my life. Now, it was while I was in England, after I left Nigeria, that I encountered this subject of ideological neocolonialism. I was watching TV one day. I would just make it very brief. But I did happen to see an interview. I watched an interview that was one of the most prominent American philanthropists. I will not name the person. A woman has a philanthropic foundation somewhere in Seattle, very mega rich. That's where I'm stopping. I'm not giving names, but the name rhymes with mate. I stopped there. Anyway, so she gave an interview about one of the biggest projects she wanted to leave as as her legacy, and she said during this news program, this is what I'm doing in Kenya. And at the time, I tell you honestly, I had such an innocent mindset that I thought, oh, amazing. This is a woman who is, doing something in Africa. And of course, by now, the little you've seen of me, how I feel about the African culture that I come from. I love the Western culture, but also I am deeply, deeply grateful for the custom and cultures that are right there inside my DNA. However, I thought, oh, let me see what she's doing. Perhaps it's something that I could, engage in or participate in. And she was doing this big project at a slum in Kenya. And in this interview, she said, oh, I quote, I went there to the slum, and I asked the women in Korogocho, outside of Nairobi, what it is that you want me to do for you. And they said to me, they want contraception. That is just what they want. Brothers and sisters, needless to say, who I was living on my own, still do live on my own, but this was back then when I lived in Canterbury, Kent. I took the remote control and I threw it at the television. Do not try that at home. I was very upset and heartbroken as an African woman. But I couldn't give a name to what it was I was hearing. And I thought, I lived in Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria, raised in Nigeria, went to school in Nigeria, got all my wonderful background education in Nigeria. Could this $5 billion, which was what she was trying to raise at the time, not have gone into educating so many African children? Could this not have built schools, libraries, hospitals? Imagine the limitless opportunities this could have provided within the communities where she was working. So I couldn't give a name to it. But as the Lord will have it, I sat down that night in anger and I started to write something. I wrote out 2,000 words. I didn't know I had it in me, but it then became known as the open letter to ... Put the name. So, this letter went viral back then, as they would call it, and then there was someone at the Pontifical Council for the Laity, I think, and they translated it into Italian, and then it went on the Vatican website, and that was the end of it. So from that point onwards, my road has led from one forum to another, trying to explain again and again. This is where the Africans are. This is where the Western donors are, and we are just not in the same place. But at the beginning, I didn't have a concept for it. I didn't have a name for it. But then, I started reading through some of the church documents, which again is one of the privileges, of course, I've had as a practicing Catholic. And I saw this that was written by Pope St. John Paul II in one of his apostolic exhortations that so few people know about, called Ecclesiae in Africa, which is a post-synodal document he wrote on the church in Africa back in 1995. I kind of find it a bit fun that he wrote it in the same year as he wrote Evangelium Vitae, so I thought he may have been thinking in the same way. Through that year, he may have been thinking along the same themes. But I'll quote from that particular apostolic exhortation. He said, "The peoples of Africa respect the life which is conceived and born. They rejoice in this life." Remember the Orono that I just did now. They reject the idea that it can be destroyed, even when the so-called progressive civilizations would like to lead them in this direction. End quote. Wow. I started reflecting on this. Two things I picked out. It is the first reality that St. John Paul II had pointed out, the fact that the Africans rejoice in life. I know it. Now you know it because you've been to my village with me and you've seen what I mean, eh? How we rejoice in every life born. Forget about the poverty. There is poverty. I'm not making light of it. But irrespective of where in society that somebody is born, everybody has this life that we are rejoicing about. Not because of the money you have, but the fact that you have been born to bless this community. And John Paul II understood that. But then the second part of it is what I'm talking about today. Is the fact that there are these so-called progressive civilizations who are trying to lead them in the direction of disregarding life. Oh, then I understood it. And of course, a couple of other people had talked about ideological colonization. So I started reading more, started writing about it, started speaking about it, started going to the different places where, it was easiest to observe this. And nowhere is it easier to observe ideological colonization, brothers and sisters, as the United Nations. So I started going to the UN. The one in New York, the one in Geneva. Several times we went for events. And at the time, this was early days, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I did not realize that the UN was a place where Western nations came together to push for certain ideologies, for certain ideas, to be forced, really forced on poorer countries, recipient countries, countries that were formerly colonized. I didn't realize that until my first trip to the UN. Baptism of fire. So I sat in a room and then I started listening to people discussing, the UN delegates, some of the people from the so-called CSOs, civil society organizations. There were all these so-called stakeholders, and nobody knew who I was, and I just sat there and I listened. It was so blatant. It was so obvious. It was so open. Because sometimes when you think, oh yeah, some of the Western countries are trying to push ideologies that we don't want, sometimes when you might think it. Sometimes you might even say it to friends in discussions. But many times, I'm sure even you have experienced this. Somebody would call you that title that most of us don't like, conspiracy theorist. I'm a scientist. I didn't want to be called a conspiracy theorist. I want to be open-minded African. But when I went there, whoa, it was lunchtime and I ran out of the UN and I ran out of the UN building. People were looking at me. I ran across the road onto the 47th Street and I found the closest Catholic church, fell on the floor and I started praying to God. Because what I saw that day made me realize that there is definitely something powerful going on around the world. Ideological colonization. There are various themes that have been picked upon by the UN. But when I speak of the UN, please don't think of it as something far from you. Because the US is one of the loudest voices and strongest voices at the United Nations. The United Kingdom is one of the strongest voices at the United Nations. France definitely is one of the strongest voices. So think of this as something that is being spoken about in your name, because it is. Now, these were some of the themes we were hearing about. SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights. Whenever this particular theme is talked about, SRHR, which is all the time at the UN, then they are talking about how to push abortion, with contraception, but not even in a way that you could say, oh, maybe they're having compassion on women, maybe it's the misunderstanding and the lack of understanding that they have. They really are trying to get more countries to get abortion legalized. Who has not heard of or seen what has happened in Latin America and what continues to happen, by the way, the green wave? All of these are being discussed at the UN. All of these are being fed. These monsters are being fed. When I say monsters, I don't mean the people, so don't get me in trouble, but I mean the ideologies being monsters are being fed, and SRHR is one of them. The next thing that we hear about at the UN is the CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education. Brothers and sisters, run for the exit. Because that means that your children already are being spoken about in terms of what they are to know about sexuality, what they are to learn in classrooms, what they are supposed to be, how they are supposed to be taught about things that have to do with human sexuality. And when you read some of the documents, honestly, that come out from these discussions, you will shudder. Even as an American, you're kind of a progressive society, huh? Some of the things are so scandalous. But they are still there nonetheless in UNICEF documents, in UNESCO, they are there. And the UN is talking about it as the sexual rights of a child, what a child should know and how you should talk about sex to a child, what you should not be telling a child about abstinence because, hey, it's not evidence-based. Because some of the Africans, I watched them at the UN trying to raise their hands, people from Uganda saying, but we have this abstinence program that we're trying to promote because of the HIV epidemic. And at the UN, they just say, keep quiet. Abstinence, chastity programs, that's not evidence-based. Now they're pushing for condoms in schools, in developing countries, at least in some of the Western countries. I know that the parents are very strong about parental rights. You know what your parental rights are. Somebody should not be able to come into a classroom and start talking to your child about sex and sexuality, even though now I cannot say as much, because if you doubt, check out what happens in classrooms across the Western countries in the month of June. I will stop there. But that is all about comprehensive sexuality education, is how your child should be taught about these ideas and ideologies. It is about Western countries developing this, but it's not just everybody from the Western. It's really not representative. I know that because I have lived in a Western country and I have friends from Western countries. But the kernel, the core of these working groups, it's the scary thing. They bring in ideologues, they bring in activists who are the top, the top tier activists from various third-party organizations, and they bring them as advisors to the United Nations to speak about comprehensive sexuality education that will really represent everybody across the world. So that is, they're speaking in the name of the Western people, but then they are trying to push it onto Africans and saying, if your children are going to get education, they must get CSC as part of it. Another alphabet that the UN talks about a lot, now more so than before, is the SOGI, S-O-G-I, sexual orientation, gender identity. They speak about this so feverishly, and there is almost no room for opposition. There is no room for dissent. There is no room for debate. If you raise your voice, and many times the Africans have actually pushed against this, and we know that, you're defunded, you're hit, you're named, you're shamed. It's an ongoing battle, ideological battle. But in all of these things I've named, all these alphabets, the SRHR, comprehensive sexuality education, the CSE, the SOGI, the reason why I bring it up here at this forum is that they are all parts of a warfare against the human body. All of it. It's about a warfare on the beauty and the dignity of the human body. That is ideological colonization. It has affected African countries. And right now, please do not think that it does not affect you, because it does. Because the thing is, the brains and the proponents of these ideological, colonialistic, let's say, elements, their interest is really to spread these ideologies throughout the world. And you can call us conspiracy theorists. You can say, oh, you're overthinking this. You're coming about this the wrong way. But it's just good that we have the knowledge of what is going on. It is important for us to know exactly what is going on because they are putting it as part of policy. That's the first thing they do. They sit down, they discuss it. Language. That's a big thing at the UN. It's like language. Let's discuss language that is going into the UN documents because it stays there for posterity. So they discuss it, and make sure that the language is written down into documents, which then filter through and become policies, which then filter through and become your politics. And then people vote for these Western politicians. And they come in with already prepared policies, written out, with language that did not even belong to those politicians before, but language is already there prepared for them. People come in, before politics, they're just regular people. And then they come in and they're speaking in these really unbelievable terms and languages that you think, where has this come from? So they're putting it into policy. But that's not all. Those who are the proponents of ideological colonization also know how to harness power with money. So it is the kind of resources that they deploy to these agendas is what is one of the most scary things that I've ever seen. I talked about the American philanthropist. They're just one person who was raising $5 billion. But that's just one person, and she's not the only one. And I don't want it to be like I'm picking on her, because she is representative of many, many people, not just in the United States. There are people like that in the UK. Definitely there are people like that in France. And right now, Canada is having a huge thing about this whole feminist, international feminist policy. So it's the way that money is deployed. It starts off with some philanthropist who says, oh, I'm coming with my own money. Or in this case, money of my ex. I will stop there. But they come in with money. Their money. Oh, what's wrong with that? It's my money. I can spend it however I want when I go to Korogocho, Kenya. Or I go to somewhere in Nigeria. Okay? But then it quickly knocks on the door of the State Secretary of the United States, and now they are in this, they're in your, they're in your Secretary of State's office, and they're discussing about it and how good this is going to be for development. They are speaking about it with the director of your United States Agency for International Development, it's USAID. You know the next thing that will happen? Then they begin to budget money, United States money, your tax dollars. They would start to tie it in with projects that have to do with going out to African countries to do this. That started off with one philanthropist who said, oh, I just want to do this with my money. So they're deploying tax dollars, they're deploying tax pounds, definitely deploying tax euros that are coming from the European Union. They are deploying tax dollars also in Canada. We have seen some of these monies and we've traced it. Many times I have written about it. Many times I've spoken about it. Definitely many times I have debated about it. You can go to YouTube and see some of the things that have happened where people have come to ask me, and then you just kind of point out some of the things and they say, oh, I don't want to discuss with you. Because then the next thing I'm about to talk about is this. They deploy, they make policies, they deploy your tax dollars, they know how to redirect it from doing good to doing whatever it is that they want. But thirdly, they don't engage in discussion or debate. It was wonderful, the incredible beginning keynote speech we had from Bishop Barron. Excellent, excellent. How blessed I felt just sitting down listening, and I'm like, yes, this is a continuation of what my grandmother taught me. Yes, this makes sense. Okay, my grandmother didn't teach me Aristotle. However, very consistent. This is why we love the Catholic faith. It is consistent. What it is we hear in small villages is what it is we're going to hear from bishops and cardinals. So church documents. It's one thread, one continuous, beautiful continuous thread. Anyway, these people don't engage in debates. I know that whatever I learn from here, I'm going to have to try to distill it to know how to take it and throw it in the face of somebody. Okay? Because they're not going to debate with me one-on-one. They're not going to debate in our language. They're not going to want to debate in kind of, let's just sit down and have this beautiful academic debate. Most times it doesn't happen that way. People who are going to confront you are people who are going to confront you at your Thanksgiving table. There are people who are going to confront you in your offices and all whatnot, and people who are setting traps for you so that they would know where you stand on this issue or that issue. So you're going to take every beautiful thing you learn here, and you're going to distill it and try to bring it to someone. And you ask them, What do you think about colonization? You're probably against it, right? Because yes, they're decolonizing mathematics now, isn't it? And Shakespeare. So what do you think about it? I don't care about decolonizing Shakespeare and all of that. You know, that's not what you want to talk about colonization. Let me tell you what colonization is. That is when somebody comes from the West, all the way from New York, to a village in Sierra Leone, and you want to tell these people about choice, reproductive choices. It's a woman's right to choose. They use language, soft language, laundered language that really means nothing. They bring to us pronouns that if I had used it in my secondary school in Owerri, my teacher would fail me because they, them is not a singular form ever. It's all happening. It's all happening.
He loves what you're saying.
It's all before you laid out, brothers and sisters. Ideological colonization, as we have experienced it from the African perspective. But as you also are experiencing it, whether you know it or not, surely you know it. Because many people have suffered, many people have been persecuted because you have spoken the truth about one thing or another, and you've refused to sign off on something or another, or you've refused to engage, participate in this whole madness, whenever it emerges, and it continues to emerge. And as we watch it, I find it interesting because I straddle both worlds. I love the fact that I'm standing very strongly in my African culture, but I'm also like in the heart of the Western civilization. And it's just interesting when I stand and watch and see what happens. And I tell my colleagues, I learned English. English is my second language. Honestly, everything I'm telling you now, I'm translating it in my head first. So I learned English from the dictionary. And that dictionary was dictionary that I had in 1991, 92, 93 when I started speaking English. If it's something that was not in that dictionary, I'm not going to take it up. I'm not going to engage in it. I'm not going to add new pronouns to anything. That's it. But the persecution continues. At Mass today was just incredible blessing. We didn't plan it with anybody, but it was just incredible blessing that within the readings we saw Jeremiah being persecuted, almost killed, in fact, almost executed. And then just fast forward a little bit to the gospel, you see the heads rolling of John the Baptist. Why? Because he spoke the truth, and he had to be killed, not just persecuted. He had to be killed for the truth. And how many of us are so afraid of being deplatformed? I don't blame you. You could lose your job. It could be more than you losing social media. It could be you losing your job, losing your medical practice. It has happened before. This is no longer conspiracy theory. Easily like this, people lose jobs in great places and great workplaces, here within the Western culture. It can happen. But that's where I propose solutions. First and foremost, let's start by understanding that everything that we are faced with, this ideological colonization that is attacking directly the human body in every form and every way. Let's understand what it is first. At its roots, it's a spiritual problem. It is a spiritual problem. Wherever or whoever you see that's pushing it, whether it's from the media or from entertainment or Hollywood or whatever, it is at its core a spiritual problem. And just like it's written in Matthew 21, I think it's 17, Matthew 17, where the disciples were asking Jesus, why can't we cast out this one that we're confronted with? He says, oh no, this one goes only by fasting and prayer. I think that's what we're faced with now. It is deeply spiritual. And so for us to begin to even confront this problem, I would propose I would beg that we go on our knees. We first go on our knees. We first understand what it is, and then we go to our Lord on our knees and begin to confront this monster that is the ideological colonization as Christians on our knees. That is the first. Secondly, we have to have knowledge of what it is. Don't be called a conspiracy theorist. I'm a scientist. I'm not interested in conspiracy theories. First, if someone tells me something, I'll go and read it. Like a lot of things I know now about all of these subjects, I would have had to read it. All the UN documents. I want to say for myself, it's not just, oh, the UN wants all African countries to have abortion. Let's read the documents. And yes, right there in the Commission of the Status of Women, they are writing it. You would see it from 1994. They had the ICPD, International Conference on Population and Development, out there in Cairo, the one that John Paul II saw, and he said, just called up pro-life people and said, go out to the UN. That was actually the first call that pro-life people had. It was after 1994. And it is no surprise that in 1995, the Holy Father then released Evangelium Vitae. It's not an accident, because in 94, something very important happened, and that was where the UN started engaging in this kind of ideological warfare that had to do with the sexual and reproductive health and rights, had to do with sexual revolution. So let's have knowledge first. Read the documents. Read everything. Read what they're saying. And then understand what you're saying. Understand the cultures that you want to engage in. If you want to engage with the African culture, understand the African people. Because I think it's when you come and have a deeper understanding. When you hear African women singing and dancing, you think, oh yeah, that's cute. But understand what they're saying. It's deep, profound. Get it. So have knowledge. Get some knowledge, get some understanding. These are spiritual virtues. These are spiritual gifts. And then thirdly, you act decisively. With the help of God, you act. If you have to vote people out, even at the lowest levels of politics, that's school board. Vote out all the evil people who are pushing ideological colonialism. Just push them out. Anybody who talks about comprehensive sexuality education, go there, vote, and definitely get them out. Definitely, yes, in the higher offices, get them out. And I'm not here to talk about American politics because it's very, very controversial. But just all you have to understand, when you have two choices, you have to be asking people, what do you care about sexual and reproductive health and rights? Oh, what about, what about surgery? And the person's like, what is surgery? Sexual orientation and gender identity. Just ask people what they think, and then you make sure that you are acting accordingly. And then, when we act, when we rise up and act with the knowledge we have, surely you would become a formidable warrior, formidable giant, facing this monster of our time, which is ideological colonialism. Go ahead. Defend life. Defend your families. Defend your communities. There was something my grandmother always used to say. It's Chinwe Ndu. God owns life, every life. From that baby that I sang about at the beginning, every single life, rich or poor, male or female, God owns life. Chinwe Ndu. So that's why I implore you today, brothers and sisters, after this conference, with all the knowledge you've got, with all the understanding you've got, with all the prayers you've said, because yes, we are here because Bishop Barron called us together, thanks be to God, so we have the benefit of prayers. Take it all together and go into your communities and defend your family. Defend your community. Defend life in every aspect that you find yourself. Be courageous. Be the hero. Be the warrior. Why? Why? Because Chinwe Ndu. Thank you.